All right, so this week we're going to be talking about human diversity and understanding the importance of it within literature. When you read Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers, you're going to see why representation is so important. We have this main character, Lovey, and the reason why I choose this book is yes, it's aged, and it's important that we use it because it's aged. And Lovey, growing up on the Big Island, is a Japanese American who all she sees on TV is Shirley Temple. That's all she sees. That's her, if we're gonna talk about, looking up to the stars and famous people, that's it. That's all she has to look at. She doesn't see herself. And imagine being, she's a Japanese American with no representation. So in her mind, her thought is, I must not be normal. I must not be blah blah. I must not be. Like I'm assuming because I don't see myself that I'm not important. And that is so heartbreaking. That is so devastating because there's so many people out there like you, Lovey. There's so many people. But she doesn't see it. And this is why representation, whether it's in commercials or literature or TV shows or music, you name it, it's important that we have it out there so that all peoples can see that there's other voices and there's other experiences. And whether or not it's, an experience that necessarily relates to us, isn't that so cool to be able to see someone else's experience? And that's the whole goal here. So when we talk about diversity, honestly, what we are talking about is just lived experiences, cultural experiences, things that maybe you or I have never experienced, but someone else has. And maybe, while it might not be a culture that we grew up in, there's still something relatable. And why? Because we're human beings. This is why Shakespeare is timeless, because he talks about the human experience, love, hate, jealousy, all the human things. It's kind of like cats. You know how all cats do the same damn thing? They knock stuff off the shelves, they put their butt in your face. Like, you can see a cat, if you own a cat, you can see a cat meme or even a dog meme, and you're like, oh, that's what my cat does, that's what my dog does. That's similar to human beings. Whether or not it is an orange cat or, the black and white tabbies or whatever, like, cats still do cat things. Humans still do human things. Like, that's the connection, and that's the goal, right? When we hear diversity, some people might have like maybe a reaction to it. What we want to think of when we think of diversity is just human experiences. That's all we're going for here is how can we get away from that monolithic view of staring straight down the same thing and go, whoa, there's other things out here, man. This is wild. That's the goal. This is why, especially in times of oh, you guys are gonna laugh because I keep pulling up the same books. Where is that book? I just had it. Oh, right over here. Sorry, I know I get distracted by my books. Hard Times, The Dust Bowl. Where's the other one? All these books, the reason why these books are so timeless and so powerful is they talk about the human experience during times of crisis. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Right now is the greatest time of our history because now we have a time to express what was it like to live through what we are living through. This is why human experience is so important because we're sharing, hey man, this is where I was when this happened. You know how many times you hear people go, oh, this is what I was doing when John F. Kennedy was shot. That's what happened to me when I grew up. I guess maybe it's 9/11. What were you doing during 9? Oh my God, some of you guys probably weren't even born during 9/11. Man, I'm aging myself. Anywho, you kind of get the idea. Where were you when? What were you doing when? Shared experiences. Okay. All right. When we talk about the literary canon is pretty much just a whole compilation of very, important, influential, exemplary works. That's what it is. Unfortunately, the canon is very it's always straight white males. Let's be honest. That's usually how it is. That's just kind of the nature in which the canon was initially developed. But we've grown. We're getting open and going, oh wow, there's more out there. Let's go take a look. So because of the literary canon having a lack of diversity, it's not giving enough of what's truly out there. And Right now, what we want to pay attention to is understanding, if we're going to open this up, what does that mean, right? What might someone considered influential, exemplary, right? And this is the problem with literature in general. Who's the person who makes this decision, right? We probably already know. But let's all, as a consensus, like start to break open and kind of look at what that looks like. What does exemplary work look like? And I think it's important that we start opening up the door to really see exactly how important different voices are. So let's kind of go through vocabulary. I already just talked about literary canon in world literature. The literary canon, we're going to try and open up to more world literature, meaning more, again, lived experiences. That's our vocabulary word there. Inclusion, meaning including voices in which we might not have heard before, whether it is the voices of women, minorities, marginalized groups, LGBTQ community, trans community, like all these voices that have normally been pushed down because people might not want to hear these experiences. But what's wild is there's not just one person who's experiencing, many people are. So to push down voices when others need to hear what they're experiencing, right? So this is why it's important that, we open it up to understanding what inclusion means, including other people's experiences, because again, not all people experience the same thing. So the more voices we have, the more understanding we get. Let's see here. Cultural diversity, meaning sometimes often you'll have diversity within the culture itself. I grew up in a Hispanic family, but not all people who grew up in families like mine all have the same cultural experiences. And I don't know if this is going to be helpful, but for me, when we were in, what do you call it? During Christmas, we would all get together, we'd make tamales, but we'd put a little black olive in the middle of the tamale. And I've asked other people, I'm like, do you guys do the olive thing? They're like, what are you talking about? And it was my favorite because I'd eat a round and the olive would be my little treat at the end. Some people use green olives, right? So sometimes there's culture within the culture. And that even includes, like, I remember going to my really good friend Sam's house and they always had milk for dinner. I'm like, who has milk for dinner? Because in my house, we never had enough milk. I grew up with two boys, and growing boys were always drinking the milk. We had like so many gallons of milk, but we didn't have it for dinner because we needed it for breakfast because we always had cereal. And so for my family, we didn't have milk at night. So to go to someone else's house, that was their cultural experience, was to have milk for dinner. So anyway, so when we think about cultural diversity, there's diversity within diversity, experiences within experiences, and those are all very important. Okay, like I had sodas for for dinner, and I've asked around about this because I've always been curious. I'm like, do you ever have milk for dinner? And people are like, milk for dinner, and they're like, yeah, what else would you have but milk for dinner? Sodas? And I'm like, oh, I had sodas. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, so we want to pull away from monolithic view, this assumption that all things should be this one way, and open it up. Okay. We want to open it up to people like marginalized groups that maybe haven't had enough of a voice, and maybe they need to have, hey, let me share with you what I've experienced. Even though I might not be the majority, I'm still enough of a group to say, hey, I am not the only one. Even one person's voice can be enough. And I say this because when we think about memes, I love memes. And I love memes because for me, I find very often shared experiences within a meme. Like you can throw something really bizarre out there and people are like, oh, dude, me too. I have synesthesia, I think is how you say it, where I see colors when I think of like numbers, or when I see colors, I taste them. I know that's very weird, but my senses have crossed in some way. I did not know there were other people like that until someone one time said something, or there was a meme or something. I'm all, you too? Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't even know it was weird until I think I brought it up to someone. I'm like, you mean 3 isn't blue to you? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, 1, it's white, right? 9's brown. 4 is orange. Like I say these legitimately are the colors I see when I think of that. Or like when I hear music, I see things. So like images, I don't know. It is what it is. Kind of like emetophobic. I'm emetophobic, which is like a fear of throwing up. But until someone else says it or shares their experience, you just think you're alone. This is why it's really important that we share within literature. And yes, I will say that memes are a form of communication, so we can call it a form of literature. So, absolutely. Personal thoughts on that. Okay. Anyway, that's what we're going to focus on as we move forward within this class. Let's see what else kind of things I've got here. One thing I would love you to take a look at is as you scroll down, I have where we emphasize different types of where it says emphasizing cultural diversity and roles of women and minorities. Take a look at those authors. Oh, there's Toni Morrison. Let me see if that's the bluest eye. Yes. Okay, so I talked already about understanding how we're looking at works critically, and I was talking about Toni Morrison. The link is here. Take a look at that. In fact, take a look at all of them. Clickety clickety click. Every single name you see in there, just kind of read through. And I want you to look at these with a critical eye, in the sense of, what is the work doing? What's the voice? What's the style? What kind of imagery and language are they using? Is there a form that matters? Like you tell me, well, you will tell me later, but you go through and take a look and really feel throughout all these works, which one's standing out to you. And I don't want to like be like, oh, it's my favorite, like Langston Hughes. I love me some Langston Hughes. That's a great one. Again, Toni Morrison, all of them. Absolutely. Indigenous literature. I don't have a link to Sherman Alexie. I think I've kind of already commented on Sherman Alexie, whom I do love his work. I really, really do. Maybe if I can find one of his, I'll post it. I don't think he's necessarily been scrubbed from the internet or anything, but I do love the way in which he tells his story. In fact, I think I'm going to throw in Every Little Hurricane. I'm going to put in Every Little Hurricane from Sherman Alexie, so that it'll make sense about the last thing I talked about in my really quick examples of how he uses nature. We've talked about that too, where he uses nature to express human behaviors, if that makes sense, right? And that's, again, like when we talk about one of our approaches to work, Sherman Alexie would be a great example of that. Okay, anyway, so when I talk about non-Western authors, take a look at the links that I have there, mostly because it's really important to understand, outside of like what people have considered like popular and cool, what else is out there, because there's some incredible works. Anyway, take a look at all those. I could go off for like hours on this one. I don't need to, because I need you to do the reading so that you can have it in your heart and you can understand it. So what I'd like you to do is, when you're going into those non-Western authors, again, read it as if you're going into it and trying to find, let me get into that one. So I'm clicking around on my links here. I want you to have active engagement within those works. And I want you to check, what's the voice of those works? What's the style? How are they doing the storytelling? What's the narrative? How does that look? Is there imagery? Is there language that's being used? I really want you to start getting an active engagement within the works now, because we're going to start it real quick as we get into poetry. Langston Hughes, I believe I'm going to be using one of his works in... Let me see, which one am I going to use his work? I'm going to check and see what I got here. I'll be using Langston Hughes's work in the poetry section, because I really do I want you to be able to use one of his works for the assignment, because I really do like the ways in which he writes. So I'm looking at my work, and for some reason, some of my work has... Anyway, there's some weird edits going on in my stuff. Anyway, very confusing. Okay, now that I've distracted all of us, some of the key themes within diversity in world literature is, I want you to look at experiences of women, LGBTQ individuals, minorities, indigenous, immigrant peoples, African American, Black, Latino, Asian American. Look at all of these different works and see how their cultural experiences influence their work, and why that's super important for all of us to understand. These voices need to be heard because it is humanity, right? Humanity is what we're looking for here. Same thing with the women authors. Take a look. You'll hear about Sylvia Plath, Mary Shelley. Um, poor Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein. Almost got no credit for it. Of course, it's usually like after the fact that most authors and writers get you know praised for their work. Anyway, so please take a look at that. We have Maya Angelou's. I know that how the Why the Caged Bird Sings really is in there. There's all kinds of good stuff. So go ahead and take a look at the religious and LGBTQ minorities in literature as well. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. Let me see, double check. I covered that. Yes. So when in our literature, or I'm sorry, in our vocabulary, you're going to see things like women authors, LGBTQ writers, minorities, indigenous writers. Using those vocabulary words, I want you to use examples that are in the lecture. Okay, so I want you to use examples of, women writers, and kind of break it in and be like, hey, look, here's some women writers, and this is kind of the voice I'm seeing. Here's some imagery that I saw. Get in this habit of, again, active engagement within the works. If you see works in there that talk about cultural survival is, okay, like in the Hawaiian culture right now, they're trying to make sure that they don't lose their language, their abilities to take care of the land, like all these things that are incredibly important for the survival of their culture. They're trying to hold on to it. And what does that look like? When we talk about the writers, I actually don't have Hawaiian writers, and you should probably throw some in there. Where are you seeing that this work is being used to keep culture alive? Where do you see the works? And if I don't know if I have any links in here, I'd have to go through. I threw in so many things, I'd have to look. But I know for sure, I'm going to try and see if I can find some Hawaiian authors that, I use Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers, but it doesn't really emphasize as much the importance of keeping the language alive. And I follow a lot of this in my social media and my Instagram. So I forget, it's always in my face, and I'm like, oh shoot, I need to add something in here. But there's other things too. We talk about Native American and keeping that culture alive. I do the Pima Creation Story in my English 2 class, but if you read the story, you see an incredible amount of Western Christian influence on the actual story of creation. In fact, this is many of the Native cultures, because it's all oral. And over time, things change. Things are influenced in some way. So how do you keep it as pure as you possibly can to just be like, this is ours. Please don't take it from us. This is all we have, right? It's really, really important. So if you have maybe a work that you see that talks about cultural survival, I would love you to share that with me. And in the class too, in that discussion, if you see something, post it. I'm in there. Also understanding the importance of gender roles and the influence of that, whether it's positive or negative, or what that looks like in works, or if you can take those gender roles out, how might you get the work to still, how you might get that work to work, if that makes sense. Like when you take out gender roles, or you switch them up, or you move them around, or you make it fluid, how does that change the work and our experiences with it? I know some of you are like, what are you talking about? Think of it as like in Wild Meat and the Bully Burgers. I'm going to keep referencing that because we're reading it, and you might have already gotten to that point by now. When Lovey gets her period, she's no longer her father's daughter. She's a woman now. But it's weird because she's not her father's daughter, because that's too feminine. She was asexual. She was just an essence. She was just a being. But the second she gets her period, now she's a woman. And the second she becomes a woman, in her eyes, in her heart, she feels like now she's less than. She's no longer this entity with her father. She's a woman, and she's lower than any other being. And when we're talking about gender roles, what does that impact in the story? Having that gender role, what does it look like to the within the development of the character and their their, as the climax of the story goes, what does that arch look like based on gender roles? How does that switch or change how the characters are interacting with each other, with society? There's so much, it's big. I mean, I'm sure Sylvia Plath for sure is a go-to for that type of, dialogue and work. Oh, there's so many. Anyway, a Toni Morrison for sure, absolutely. I know I kind of keep pointing to the same people, but take a look at the works that we have here and see where you might see that influence, especially within different cultures, whether it's the Native American culture, LGBTQ community, things in which what is gender roles look like within those different cultures and communities, and then also with diversity. One of the really big parts that I think we also need to be mindful of as we are reading things actively is understanding self-discovery. This I think is why I love this type of literature, is it is always a form in some way of self-discovery, whether it's within self, within the character self, again, within the arc, the story arc, at what point is there self-discovery, because that's a part of the human experience. So anyway, hopefully that really helped you. I'm trying to give as many examples I can to kind of walk you through. The best examples, to be honest with you, again, it's a literature class you got to read, but it's totally worth it. I'm in your as you all walked through and did your introductions. A lot of you are probably, I don't know how much of these you've already read. If you have more you want to suggest for me, I'm all for it. I am open for more. But if you haven't already seen some of them, try and take a look at the writings and the authors of people you haven't read yet. Some of these I do use, like Diaz's No Face. I used that in my short story. So some of these you're going to see like repetition with. Anyway, take a look at those, share if you want, and let me know if you have questions. Let me double check and make sure I cover everything for you. I'm gonna go back to one more assignment. Thank you for your patience while my computer goes wicked slow. Okay, didn't want to do it. Let's do, I apologize, I might have to get through. Okay, let's do human diversity. Perfect. Okay, yes, make sure that you're using at least one example of the works that I have posted in there. I want you to use those links, okay? And the reason for that is because I want you to show me that you are, one, reading the lecture, and that you are listening to the play. Pause it. I don't mean to, I'm not here to trick you, but it is helpful that I see that you're working with the works that we're working. If on the side you do want to share works with me that you've read, you're like, oh, this would be perfect for that, I love it. I absolutely love it. Stick with what we have in the reading, but send me a message on anything you want to share, and then I'll see if I can add it in our other assignments that we do. So, hey, we all work together. I want you to feel like empowered in this class to really like, yes, I understand this material, and hey, let me share this with you. I want this to feel more as communal as I can get for being an online class. So all right, so if you have questions, please reach out to me. Always be very specific in your reading responses, and again, use examples, whether it's the one I used for in my actual lecture or something you pulled from the reading. So show me that you know what we're talking about, because y'all are fantastic. I'm excited to see what you come up with, and I promise the dryness, we're done, we're almost done. We're gonna get straight into poetry, and I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked my insides almost hurt. So anyway, message me if you have questions. Why doesn't this thing stop?